They called me a maniac, an arsonist, a bitter old fool who couldn't let go of the past, but the truth is I saved an entire valley from a $1 million firebomb disguised as a wellness retreat. The HOA built a 3-story tinderbox on land they stole from my family, and when I tore it down before it could kill dozens of people, they sued me. Imagine that they steal, they endanger lives, and I'm the one dragged into court. When I first came back to McLaren Ridge after Sarah died, I wanted peace. I wanted quiet mornings in my grandfather's cabin, maybe some light consulting work with the Forestry Service, nothing more. After 30 years of fighting wildfires, I thought I'd earned it. But 47 minutes after I parked my truck, I was staring at the ugliest structure I'd ever seen untreated. Cedar posts, pine siding. Propane tanks lined up against a wall like matchsticks. A so-called healing retreat perched on a wind tunnel ridge we all knew could turn into a firestorm in seconds. I didn't even need to guess. I flicked my lighter against one of those posts, and it went up in a whoosh, flames leaping fast enough to make my skin crawl. That's when I heard her voice. Paula Grant. Mid-40s, dripping with yoga chic and fake serenity, announcing that I was trespassing on community property. She crossed her arms, looked me up and down like I was senile, and said, "I'm Paula, Wellness Director for Summit Wellness HOA. We have county approval for everything you see here." I wanted to laugh. County approval. My family owned this ridge since the 60s. My grandfather died fighting fire on this slope. I warned her straight, one spark and that house would ignite the entire valley. She smiled condescendingly, talking about peace and wellness as if chanting mantras could stop flames. She told me to leave their property. Those 2 words echoed in my skull all the way back to the truck. Their property. At the county office, I asked for the permits. The clerk handed me copies showing my dead brother Robert as the one who sold the land to the HOA 9 months earlier. Robert, who'd been in the ground since 2009. Someone had forged his name to steal my family's land. I went straight to Laura Mitchell, an environmental lawyer recommended by an old fire buddy. She flipped through the documents, whistled, and said, "If this is accurate, we're looking at multiple felonies." She was sharp, no nonsense, exactly what I needed. But before we could even file a challenge, a sheriff's deputy showed up at her office with a restraining order. The HOA claimed I'd threatened staff and interfered with construction. Suddenly, I was barred from going near the retreat on my own ridge. I thought maybe the community would see reason if I showed them the danger. At a meeting Paula hosted, I brought a sample of that cedar timber. While she droned on about mindfulness, I lit the timber for everyone to see it burst into flame in seconds. Gasps, smoke, black char curling into the sky. I said, "This is what 60 people will be sleeping in next weekend." But instead of outrage, people looked at me like I was crazy. Security escorted me out while Paula smiled and told the crowd I was jealous and negative. By that evening, someone uploaded the clip. "Unhinged former fire chief disrupts wellness event." That was the caption. The comments shredded me, bitter old man, lunatic danger to society. The next morning, my power was cut off for safety inspections. At the grocery store, neighbors I'd once saved from fire crossed the street to avoid me. Someone spray-painted "Arsonist" across my truck in red. 30 years of service down the drain replaced by whispers and hostility. Sitting in the dark cabin with only a candle and Sarah's picture, I thought about walking away. Selling the land. Letting them win. Maybe I really was just a stubborn old fool. Maybe I couldn't see the bigger picture. I even signed the papers to put the property on the market. For a moment, I believed quitting was easier. But then, I opened my grandfather's trunk. The old brass lock clicked, and inside I found a thick folder labeled McLaren Ridge Property Agreement. It was from 1964, typed on federal letterhead signed by the Forest Service, the Department of Interior, and my grandfather. It declared the ridge a permanent wildfire buffer zone, no commercial construction ever, unless the McLaren family gave written consent, which of course we never had. That document changed everything. It wasn't just my word against theirs anymore. It was federal law, and my grandfather's sacrifice. He'd given part of the ridge after a 1964 fire killed 12 people in a lodge built almost identical to Gregory Vaughn's retreat. Now, history was trying to repeat itself, and I was the only one standing in the way. Laura and I prepared for the county hearing. The courthouse buzzed with cameras and residents packed in shoulder to shoulder. Paula sat in white robes with her followers. Gregory Vaughn arrived in a tailored suit smug as hell with a team of lawyers lined up like soldiers. I wore my dress fire uniform, the same one I'd worn to funerals of fallen firefighters. Not for theatrics, just to remind everyone I'd earned the right to talk about fire safety. Laura laid it out clean. Robert's death certificate from 2009, right next to the forged deed dated 2023. "Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot sign documents 15 years after your death," she said, her voice slicing through the room. Then she rolled out the 1964 agreement on the big screen. Government seals, federal signatures, everything in black and white. My turn. I showed photographs from my grandfather's collection, the charred remains of that old lodge, the burnt vehicles stuck on evacuation routes, the victims who never made it out. Then I pointed to the retreat's blueprints, the single road, the untreated timbers, the propane tanks stacked like bombs. "This is history repeating itself," I told them. Profit over safety again. And then came the moment that burned into my memory. Federal agents who'd been quietly investigating Vaughn Development stood and asked Gregory straight, why did his insurance coverage exceed construction costs by millions? He tried to dance around it, but then, maybe out of arrogance, maybe out of sheer stupidity, he said, "The bigger the fire gets, the more insurance money comes in. That's just sound business practice." The room exploded, gasps, shouts, disbelief. Paula's serene mask cracked. Her followers stared at her like she'd betrayed them. Gregory realized too late he'd just confessed to engineering death traps for profit. For weeks, I'd been the villain, the crazy old firefighter tearing down a healing sanctuary. But in that instant, the narrative flipped. Reporters captured his words. Neighbors who'd spat at me suddenly stood and clapped. 300 people on their feet applauding me for saving them from a massacre. Gregory was led out under federal investigation charges, already piling up fraud, conspiracy, environmental violations. Paula vanished soon after, her empire of wellness crumbling into dust. And me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just stood there, uniform heavy on my shoulders, finally vindicated but hollow because all of this should never have happened in the first place. Some battles you don't choose. They come for you disguised as neighbors with clipboards and fake smiles backed by money and paper lies. And when that happens, you've got two choices: give up or fight like hell. The lesson: legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you defend.